Did you hear about the dark web hacking group that threatened to release files about the deadliest terror attack in history? What about the organized crime gangs in Europe? The ones who carry self-destructing Mission Impossible phones, who had soundproofed torture dungeons hidden deep in the woods? These are some of the absolutely insane things we'll be covering on today's episode of the Infographics Show. The worst crimes committed on the dark web. Number 6. The wannabe Texas cannibal. You've all heard about cannibals sharing tips, even recipes, on the dark web. In fact, if you go to the forums, you can find people talking about this kind of thing. But talking about it isn't doing it. So the question is, do cannibals actually exist on the dark web? Well, while there are certainly lots of dark web lies going around online, we know for a fact there are budding cannibals out there. Meet Alexander Nathan Barter. In 2018, when he was 21, Alexander wrote on one of the many dark web forums, "I'd like to try cannibalism and see how it feels to take a life. If you'd be willing to let me kill you, are in the US, preferably in the South, and can travel by car, contact me." Not only was he looking for a victim, but he expected them to cover their own gas money for the privilege of being killed and eaten. No sooner than the digital ink dried on his query, he received a reply. A man claimed that he could deliver a human to him, a woman specifically for killing and eating. The two men exchanged more messages, went over some logistics and some other fine details. Then on October 19, 2018, according to the U.S. Justice Department, Barter arrived at the designated meat site in Joaquin, Texas with a knife, a trash bag, a cellular phone, and a tablet. This guy was really gonna do it. But just as his twisted fantasy seemed within reach, his world came crashing down. The man he had been plotting with was a law enforcement agent. With guns pointed in his direction, Barter dropped his bag of tools and thought, "You got me." A year later, he was standing in court being told he'd be serving 40 long years in a federal prison. The Justice Department said, as this chilling case demonstrates, online talk is not always just talk. The same is true for this next story. But in these cases, people actually died. Number 5. Amateur hour assassins. As you'll see later, there are a lot of scammers and undercover cops in the dark web pretending to be hitmen for hire. The word on the street is dark web contract killing is a myth, but some streets are obviously a lot darker than others. Yevgenia Shishkina, a high-ranking Russian police investigator, was gunned down outside of her home in Moscow in October 2018. 5 months later, authorities said they had 2 suspects in custody for the murder: a 17-year-old, too young to be mentioned by name, and a 19-year-old named Abdulaziz Abdulazizov. According to BBC Russia, case files revealed that the dark web contract murders aren't always make-believe. The 2 teenagers were paid about $15,000 to murder Shishkina. She'd been investigating a drug kingpin who ran an empire on Russia's largest dark web marketplace, Hydra. The man, whose name wasn't in the documents, had hired the 17-year-old schoolboy from the dark web. Like so many youngsters desperate for money, the younger teen placed an ad on a forum saying he was available for work, and he wasn't picky about what kind of work. It's also doubtful he had the requisite skills for the 200,000 or so employment-related ads you can find on about 150 dark web forums. Most jobs are IT-related, the sketchy version of IT, and this kid was looking for something a bit more basic. He approached Abdulazizov after they'd been playing basketball in St. Petersburg. It seems that he was a broke medical student at the Medico-Social Institute. For just over half of the money, he agreed to do the hit, his Hippocratic oath obviously not getting in the way. Abdulazizov later drove about 440 miles to Moscow, booked a hotel, and picked up a modified pistol that had been left for him in a drop box in the woods. He was evidently new to contract killing since he had to watch a YouTube video to see how the pistol was loaded. He later told the police that he felt lightheaded on the day of the job, and that was when he ran up behind Shishkina, fired 2 bullets into her, and then as she fell into her husband's arms, he ran away. His movements that day were easy to track because this very amateur assassin had used taxi apps to get to Shishkina's house and then get back to his hotel. His friends later said that they were shocked beyond belief. One told the media he was very kind, he never offended anyone. I've never heard that he got into any sort of fight. His girlfriend was the most surprised. On the day he was arrested a few months after the murder, they'd been planning to go see a movie and he promised to buy her a lovely gift. Ethics aside, assassination at least pays well. As you'll see throughout this entire video, there are some extremely messed up people on the dark web, including these next 2 guys. In 2021, media in Finland reported that 2 young men, Aatu Viljami Halonen, 20, and Mika Markus Alexi Hutonen, 19, had conspired through the dark web to kill Halonen's father. About a year earlier, Hutonen had put the ad on the dark web, stating that he was available for assassination projects if someone had a job for him. Notably, around this time, he told his girlfriend he'd always wanted to kill someone. Halonen answered the ad and offered $11,000 for a contract killing. It wasn't what you would call a clean job. According to the Finnish press, Halonen stabbed the father 40 times, turning the crime scene into something out of a slaughterhouse horror film. And all of it was caught on a surveillance camera. To make matters even more bizarre, the hobbyist hitman left behind a bag. Inside, police found a pellet gun, not exactly the weapon of choice for a professional assassin. A subsequent investigation noted that Halonen had been treated badly by his father during his childhood, but that there was also a financial motive. Number 4. The Cyber Bunker. Let's say you're a business person, but not the kind with a tax ID or a business your mother-in-law would approve of. Maybe you run a pornography empire or stream stolen Hollywood movies, or you run an online mall for illicit drugs. So when you need a little help, who do you call? The answer? A data center that doesn't ask questions, preferably one buried deep inside of a bunker. In 2020, the owners of one such bunker-turned-cybercrime fortress found themselves on trial in what was called Germany's largest ever cybercrime case. The men were charged with running a bulletproof data center, a server farm so secure the governments couldn't touch it. But this wasn't hidden in some lawless back alley. No, it was tucked away in a picturesque German town famous for its Riesling wine. Inside this digital underworld, prosecutors uncovered 249,000 illegal transactions, drug deals, contract killings, money laundering, a shadow economy worth millions of euros. There were actually 2 bunkers. The first one in the Netherlands was a nuclear bomb-proof NATO command center during the Cold War. In 1995, it was taken over by a Dutchman named Herman Johan Zen. He lived down there and turned it into what became known as the Cyber Bunker. It burnt down in 2002 when the cops discovered Zen was making MDMA as well as hosting porn and torrent sites. Not to be dismayed, Zen and his men later started working in a second bunker in Traben-Trarbach, Germany. Here, they expanded their dark web empire. They hosted servers for black market sites peddling everything from bricks of brown tar heroin to fake IDs, even a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of wherever you want. One such website was the Wall Street Market, which had around 1.1 million users and 5,400 vendors selling crystal meth, heroin, coke, ecstasy, weed, along with counterfeit software and fake documents. It was the second biggest marketplace, up there in dark web history with the likes of Silk Road, Alpha Bay, Dream Market, and Hansa. The owners of Wall Street got rich, taking a 2 to 6% commission on the many millions of dollars worth of drugs sold there. But the Cyber Bunker went very much deeper into the world of crime. It worked with a notorious Irish organized crime boss known as the Penguin. You name it, the Penguin did it. From trafficking drugs to running drug laboratories to armed robberies to hijackings and of course extreme violence if need be. His real name was George Mitchell, once put on the IRA's death list, so he got out of Ireland and then went to live in Germany and the Netherlands. When you run a multi-million-dollar highly illegal enterprise, you need privacy and security. So the Penguin struck a deal with the Cyber Bunker crew to run his encrypted messaging service, Xclue, through the bunker. For just $1,000 per 6-month license, Xclue became the go-to app for 10,000 criminals, offering unbreakable secrecy. After the bunker was raided in 2019 by over 600 German cops, Zen and 6 other guys were arrested and later sentenced to serve 2 to 4 years in prison. Yeah, compared to the US, Europeans go easy on their criminal masterminds. One of the investigators said, "We'll probably never know exactly what went on in the bunker. This really is history in the making." Police were then able to decrypt the Xclue services and they arrested 48 major criminals, as well as confiscating over $4 million and many kilos of hard drugs. As for the Penguin, as everyone knows, he's a slippery character and he's still out there. You'll meet some gangsters a lot scarier than the Penguin later in this video. But first, let's have a look at some enterprising hackers who took on all kinds of establishments. Number 3. The Dark Overlord. A ping echoes through an ordinary office as an email lands in a worker's inbox. At first glance, it seems just like another scam, a ransom demand for money, threatening to expose secret 9/11 files. The recipient scoffs, another hoax. Or is it? Pretty soon the files start leaking, and just like that, the conspiracy theorists light up. The internet catches fire and the world starts asking questions no one was supposed to ask. The senders of the email were part of a European cybercrime unit that called themselves the Dark Overlord, or TDO. They shared hacking information on the dark web where they also dumped millions of people's personal info. In 2017, they committed the worst sin of all when they tried to extort Netflix by threatening to release 10 new episodes from its hit show Orange is the New Black. It might not sound like the crime of the century, but each episode cost around $4 million to produce. If those files were leaked, Netflix wouldn't just suffer a PR nightmare, it would take a direct hit where it hurts the most, the bottom line. The hackers later went on X, Twitter, and wrote, "Our proposals went unanswered, so our hands have been forced. We were quite offended." The files soon went onto torrent sites and sketchy movie streaming services, and before you could say buffering, millions of people around the world were thinking the same thing. What's the point in paying for content when you can get it for free? They later hacked Disney too. Then came the 9/11 stuff, with Dark Overlord threatening to burn down the deep state by leaking dark government secrets. If you were conspiracy-minded, this was an exciting time. The so-called 9/11 papers were at the center of a $2 million extortion scheme. They demanded the ransom to prevent the release of highly sensitive insurance records from industry giants like Lloyd's of London and Hiscox syndicates. It now had hundreds of thousands of 9/11 records that it said it would release in layers, thereby showing it did indeed have some very sensitive data. Notwithstanding the data the US government might not want to become public knowledge, there was information about legal liabilities, so the leak could prove to be very costly. Some payments were indeed made. According to the website CyberScoop, after Layer 1 was released, one of 5, the Dark Overlord's Bitcoin wallet had received 15 payments. The group wrote, "Continue to keep the Bitcoins flowing. Remember, cybercash for cybercash." Alas, it seems 9/11 truthers didn't get the smoking guns they were looking for, but the US government was furious. A British man was arrested and later extradited to the US. Nathan Wyatt, in his late 30s, got 5 years to be served stateside for his role in Dark Overlord. Calling himself the Crafty Cockney, he was told he'd have to pay $1 million in fines, but it seems he was low on funds. He probably answered one of the Dark Overlord's job posts on the dark web that said, "If you're goal-oriented and used to objectives and achieving them, then you're perfect for us. Must have a winning attitude. Life is too short not to be rich." The fact is, Dark Overlord isn't so much a gang but a hive. In an interview, one of its chief members once said, "The more members a hive possesses, the more processing power and possibilities the hive has." So, the Crafty Cockney was but a small fish in a very large, very murky pond. But let's now get back to the business of murder. Number 2. The ultimate dark web hitman story. The evidence shows that far more people than we would like to believe are willing to hand over their hard-earned money for murder. But some don't just want someone dead, they want suffering. On the now-defunct Slayer's Hitman site, users could order a ruined life for a price. $4,000 for an acid attack, $10,000 for a crippling, $11,000 for blinding, and for the truly sadistic there is $50,000 bespoke, and for the truly sadistic there is a $50,000 bespoke torture session, a brutal mix of all the above, ending in death. But let's imagine you went on the dark web a few years ago and you were looking to hire someone to simply kill your husband or wife and make it look like an accident. You would have probably come across the Bessa Mafia Hitman site, which by all accounts was the most reliable hitman service on the dark web. In 2016, a 43-year-old American IT expert named Stephen Allwine took them up on their offer. He said he had $6 grand for a hitman to take out a woman named Amy, who also happened to be his wife. Stephen provided specific details requesting a simple car accident and even shared the exact route and the time that she'd be driving to a dog training course in Moline, Illinois. That was it, simple. He paid up, but as time passed, Amy was still breathing, and it transpired that the Bessa Mafia was having some staffing issues. At the time, it was advertising assassin jobs on its main page, asking candidates to send in audition tapes, i.e. murders. The site admin told Stephen that it's usually very reliable US-based hitman wasn't available, so he'd have to pay another $12,000. This was getting expensive, but in the end, Amy did end up dead. Stephen, actually a holy man and elder at his church, was secretly rubbing his hands in glee as crocodile tears rolled down his cheeks. To unravel this murky, twisted tale, we need to introduce an unlikely key player, a computer systems administrator from the UK, named Chris Monteiro. A self-confessed geek, Chris never imagined his online hobby would one day make him famous at the FBI. Chris spent much of his time correcting misinformation, editing Wikipedia pages, debunking myths, and calling out online scams. On Rational Wiki, he confidently wrote that dark web hitman sites were a hoax, nothing more than elaborate scams. Then one day, someone edited his entry saying those guys will kill for money. Chris, a self-confessed geek, took umbrage. He logged into the dark web and then left a review on Bessa Mafia calling it a total scam. A few days later, the admin replied telling him, "Let me know if we can prove it to you that we are legit." Chris was still thinking these guys were all talk. But then he received a video that made his stomach go funny. The footage showed someone blowing up a car, Then, as smoke and flames filled the air, the person turned to the camera holding up a sign that read, "Gang member for Bessa Mafia on Deep Web." At this point, Chris started to think he might be in over his head. But he still wasn't sure these guys were the real deal. So he contacted the site under a new name, Bodie McBoatface, saying he wanted someone killed. That person, he said, was Bob the Builder. Now officially a member of Bessa Mafia, Chris did what he did best, hacking into the system. Using a vulnerability in the site's code, he downloaded its entire message database. He had all the messages of people wanting their dear beloveds and business partners whacked. It turned out there were a lot of them. A guy in the US said he wanted his wife's secret lover killed. He said he'd even donate his own organs if he could get a discount. A woman in the Netherlands was willing to pay for a violent execution for a man to be mowed down while riding his bicycle. And one guy in Moline, Illinois had asked for his wife to die in a car crash, but for it to look like an accident. That was Steven, who after paying and waiting, then got desperate, writing, "Just shoot her then." Or, he said, simply burn down the house with her in it. After uncovering the dark web hit list, he contacted British police. But instead of launching an immediate investigation, they shrugged it off. Then one day, as he sat in his London home, his front door exploded inward. Armed officers stormed in, guns raised. Chris was thrown to the floor and cuffed. He was under arrest for murder. He was charged with being connected to an organized crime group, specifically the Bessa Mafia. Chris was stunned. Then it hit him. He had been played. The Bessa Mafia had launched its own counterattack, fabricating evidence and running a misinformation campaign to paint him as a criminal mastermind. For the next 2 days, he endured a grueling interrogation, forced to explain the absurd. Yes, he was Bodie McBoatface. No, he actually hadn't hired a hitman to kill Bob the Builder. Eventually, investigators saw the truth. The UK's National Crime Agency combed through his computers, confirmed his story, and more importantly, took a hard look at the list of assassination requests that he had hacked from Bessa Mafia. Not only that, they liked the list of messages that he'd hacked from Bessa Mafia, especially the one from a British doctor who wanted a financial advisor murdered. Then the FBI called. Chris had gone from suspect to unwitting informant in an international FBI investigation. Now let's go back to Amy, a woman of faith who had met Steven in Christian college. As we told you, she actually did end up dead, but it wasn't the Bessa Mafia that did it. Steven got sick of waiting, so he did it himself. He now holds Bible classes in prison where he is serving a life sentence. An investigation revealed that Stephen Allwine had been leading a double life, cheating on Amy with 2 women that he met on the adult site Ashley Madison. His first attempt to have her killed failed after hiring a hitman through Bessa Mafia, a dark web assassination service that ultimately scammed him. Undeterred, he turned to another deadly solution, the devil's breath, the powerful hypnotic drug scopolamine. He spiked Amy's drink, and when she later Googled vertigo, confused and disoriented, he waited for her to die. When that didn't happen, he shot her and staged the scene to look self-inflicted. On November 13, 2016, he dialed 911, saying his wife was dead. The case might have gone unsolved, but US media later reported that the key to his arrest came from a trove of emails the FBI received from an anonymous source on the dark web. This source was Geek Chris, who'd gone much deeper into the dark web than he intended to, uncovering 283 messages, each one from someone willing to pay for murder or torture. Now for some rather obscene violence. Number 1. Welcome to Hell. In 2020, an encrypted messaging app, EncroChat, used by about 60,000 gangsters all over Europe, was infiltrated by the police. Nicknamed the WhatsApp for gangsters, the app was likely designed by Dutch organized criminals. It became the go-to messaging service for Europe's big boys, very popular among British drug barons because the fact was it was a great piece of technology. Suffice it to say, when you are selling hundreds of millions of dollars worth of drugs, you can afford very talented developers. It even had a self-destruct mode, aka a panic wipe. You could enter a 4-digit code on the lock screen and all the data on the phone would be deleted forever. This often included very intimate messages, not just about drugs, but gangsters ordering gruesome retribution on their enemies. After the infiltration, cops in the Netherlands confiscated 6 tons of coke and 1.2 tons of meth, as well as 19 drug labs and many millions of dollars. In the UK, where 10,000 EncroChat users were active, authorities intercepted 2 tons of drugs, over $100 million, and a stockpile of submachine guns, handguns, and grenades. The British police said they'd prevented about 200 gangland murders. 11 of the men who had used the app belonged to a gang in the Netherlands. What is unique about these guys was their willingness to take violence up to the highest notch. They had 7 shipping containers hidden in a Dutch forest, where they were planning to do things you might have only seen in Hollywood torture movies. One of the containers was called an underworld prison, a place to keep captive their enemies or their families. In another container sat the scariest thing you'll ever see in your life. This was a container that had a dentist's chair with arm and leg straps, a torture chair. Next to it were scalpels, claw hammers, finger clamps, pliers, pruning shears, and of course, blowtorches. A gang researcher in Latin America said the Europeans had obviously become more organized about torture than their counterparts over the sea, writing, "We've never come across anything as theatrical as this, and I have never come across the need for a torture infrastructure." Naturally, the container had been soundproofed with large padded steel plates. The floors were covered with self-adhesive Primacover material for protection against liquid spillage. There was also a large freezer nearby for the bodies. Since torture sessions can be time-consuming, there was a chemical toilet and a sleeping area with tables, chairs, a basin, and a coffee machine. The victims didn't get a bed, but there were handcuffs dangling from a bar under the ceiling. Of course, there were video cameras everywhere, so rivals in the cocaine war could one day be sent rather shocking video nasties. When the cops looked at the phones of these gang members, they found some disturbing conversations. It seems someone had stolen over $100 million from the men, money that they'd invested in Dubai. So they had a list of 8 names to be taken to the torture prison. Police said even women and children and family dogs were to be sent there. The men were apparently very upset. One of the gang members that was involved was Ibrahim Azaim, but it seems his rivals got to him first, shooting him in Rotterdam in 2020. His friend, Piet Costa, was said to be saddened by this loss, so he'd constructed the torture prisons. The containers were a work in progress, but it's obvious they were going to be used. The cops said that they were a week away from completion, but blood found in one of them likely means that they had done a test run already. The dark web is a place of mystery, crime, and secrets, but which of these cases disturbed you the most? Do you think there are even bigger crimes out there that we still don't know about? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Now you should watch how Belgium became the cocaine capital of the world, or have a look at the most ruthless and dangerous gangs in the world.